Welcome to my channel, HFY Tales. I only thought it. Then she turned and whispered, "Careful, human." I hear everything, he thought. His mind was his own. Until she whispered, "Careful, human. I hear everything." One thought, one fleeting, a secret. And suddenly nothing was private anymore. In a station teeming with deadly sentinels, Adrian's every fear, impulse, and desire is exposed to Ashara, a telepath unlike anything he's ever encountered, trapped, hunted, and forced to trust someone who can see his every hidden thought. He must navigate a deadly game of survival, deception, and unspoken desire. What happens when your mind is no longer your own and the one who sees it could save or destroy you? Dr. Adrian Klein had always been meticulous, always cautious. Years of studying telepathic phenomena had taught him that the mind could be a dangerous thing, volatile, secretive, and sometimes deadly. Yet nothing in his extensive training or academic research had prepared him for the experience of being in the same room as Ambassador Ashara Velinn. He had read reports, studied images, memorized transcripts, and even prepared psychological profiles, but none of that could capture the gravity of her presence. She was not merely beautiful. She radiated an energy that made the air around her feel charged, electric, almost alive. Her posture, precise and regal, seemed to command the room without a word. And then there was the uncanny sense that she already knew everything, every second of his life, every thought he had dared to keep buried. The observation deck of the embassy station stretched above the planet below, a panoramic window framing the swirling storms and glittering cities in the distance. Adrian had thought this would be a routine briefing, humanity's first contact with a telepathic alien civilization. Theoretically, he had every reason to believe it would be orderly, formal, predictable. But as he sat across from Ashara, whatever gaze pressed on him like gravity itself, he tried to focus on his notes, on the reports before him, but it was impossible. His thoughts wandered in ways they shouldn't, betraying his curiosity, his fascination, even his most private imaginings. He caught himself thinking about her smile, about the way her eyes glimmered with intelligence and something darker, more unknowable. He imagined what it might feel like to reach out, to brush a hand against hers, to speak freely without the rigid etiquette of interstellar diplomacy. He imagined her laughing at some private joke, and for a fleeting, foolish second, he allowed himself to consider what it would mean if she smiled at him, not as an ambassador, not as a representative of her civilization, but as someone human. That's when it happened. Her head tilted slightly, a movement so subtle he almost missed it. Her lips parted just enough for him to catch a soft intake of breath. And then she spoke, her voice low, a whisper meant for him alone despite the vast chamber. "Careful, human. I hear everything." Adrian froze. The words seemed to reverberate, not just in the room, but inside his mind. Panic surged through him, a mixture of fear and disbelief. Every thought, every hidden musing, every private calculation he had made in the last few seconds or perhaps the last years was no longer his own. Had she really heard him? There was no way. Telepaths were rare, controlled, studied. In human history suggested a being could so effortlessly penetrate the private recesses of the mind, without elaborate rituals or direct consent. Yet the calm, deliberate precision in her gaze told him otherwise. She wasn't bluffing. She wasn't guessing. She knew. His mouth opened, words failing him, heart hammering in his chest. I didn't," he stammered. But she raised a hand, and it was as though the motion alone silenced him. Her eyes, a deep, shifting color that defied description, held his in a gaze that was impossible to break. Fear prickled his skin, yet beneath it was an undeniable thriller, recognition of the danger and the intimacy of being utterly exposed. He thought of just said, a voice soft but laced with a strange amusement. Every curiosity, every fleeting desire, every hesitation, it's all there. She leaned slightly forward, and he noticed a subtle shimmer, an almost imperceptible pulse in the air around her, as if her very presence resonated with his mind. Adrian's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary conversation. This was an invasion, a revelation, a confrontation with the limits of human perception. He tried to focus on her words, to maintain some semblance of control. I didn't mean anything," he whispered, knowing how futile it sounded. He wasn't lying in the traditional sense. His thoughts were raw, uncontrolled, exposed in ways that no human or alien should ever witness. And yet, the fact that she was listening, judging, and was every instinct he had screamed both fear and fascination. Her smile widened, subtle and knowing. Intentions are irrelevant. Human. The mind doesn't lie. It only betrays. And in that betrayal, we learn truths that words could never convey. Her voice was hypnotic, a mixture of silk and steel, soothing yet unyielding. Adrian swallowed hard, trying to regain composure, but it was useless. Every nerve in his body was alert, every thought amplified, every heartbeat a drum in the chamber of his chest. He tried to rationalize, to ground himself. Perhaps she was projecting. Perhaps there was some technology, some neurointerface he had missed in his initial scans. But the clarity of her insight, the precision with which she articulated what he had only dared think in secret, shattered every theory he had clung to. There was no trick. There was no illusion. She had heard him. She had known. The hum of the station's engines beneath him seemed to grow louder, almost in response to the tension in the room. Adrian's gaze flicked to the panoramic window, the swirling storms below, the sparkling lights of distant cities, but his mind couldn't focus on anything but her. He had studied telepathy, yes, but always from a distance, always as an observer, never as a participant. The intimacy, the violation, the unspoken connection, it was overwhelming then. Before he could recover from the shock, the observation deck trembled violently. Lights flickered, alarms flared, and the smooth hum of the station's engines became a harsh, grinding roar. Adrian stumbled, catching himself on the console, heart leaping into his throat. Ashara's composure didn't falter. She stood, poised and unflinching, as if the chaos around them was an inconvenient detail rather than a threat. "They're coming," she said, her voice almost casual, but the weight of it sent chills down his spine. "And they know you're here." Adrian's stomach dropped. Who, how, and why? He wanted to question her, to demand answers, but the tremor intensified, throwing debris and shrapnel across the deck. She moved with uncanny speed, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the emergency exit, her grip firm, controlled and undeniably commanding as they ran. Adrian's mind raced. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he couldn't shake the sense of wonder mixed with terror. He had glimpsed a being who could peer into his very soul, who could understand him in ways no human ever could. And yet, with the threat closing in from unknown assailants, with the station shuddering around them, he realized that survival and perhaps understanding her fully depended on his ability to follow her, to trust her entirely. They reached a side corridor, and she pressed a hand to the wall, halting abruptly. Her gaze flicked toward him, sharp and intense. "Careful," she whispered again, almost teasingly, yet the underlying gravity of the words anchored him in fear. "They can hear you think, just as I can. Every hesitation, every planet's all visible to them. One mistake, and..." The sentence hung in the air, unfinished, yet Adrian understood perfectly. One mistake could mean death, not just for him, but perhaps for them both. And as the lights flickered once more, throwing long shadows across the corridor, he realized that from the moment he thought those first thoughts about her, he had stepped into a world where nothing was private, nothing was safe, and trust was the only currency that could buy survival. And in that moment, as the emergency sirens wailed, and the station groaned with stress, Adrian understood the terrifying, exhilarating truth. He was no longer just a human. He was a participant in something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more intimate than anything he had ever imagined. And Ashara Velinn, enigmatic, beautiful, and terrifying, held all the keys. The shadows shifted in the corridor ahead, and the faint hum of machinery aura was at life, sent a chill down his spine. He gripped her arm tighter, knowing that whatever waited beyond the bend was unlike anything he had faced before. And in the silence between the alarms, between his racing heartbeat, he realized that he had no choice but to follow, because she wasn't just listening, she was guiding him. The corridor stretched endlessly, a metal tunnel lined with panels, flickering lights, and the faint hum of the station's failing systems. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears louder than the alarms surrounding them. Behind him, the sounds of the station shifting, twisting, and straining under unknown forces created a dissonant symphony of fear. He tried to focus, tried to center himself on Ashara's calm, unwavering presence at his side. She moved with purpose, each step precise, deliberate, as though she had rehearsed this moment countless times. Her hand gripped his with firm control, yet not so tight as to be painful. It was a lifeline, and Adrian clung to it desperately. "Need to focus on what's in front of you, not what's in your head," Ashara murmured, her voice smooth, calm, and completely unnerving. He couldn't help but glance at her, studying her features, the way her eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, the subtle curve of her lips, the way she seemed almost untouchable even amidst the chaos. He had thought he understood telepathy as an abstract concept, something distant and clinical, but with her, it was visceral, personal, and terrifying. She knew his thoughts before he fully formed them, anticipated his reactions, and yet she wasn't cruel. She simply observed, guided, and when necessary, protected. Adrian's mind flashed back to the first words she had whispered, the ones that had rooted him to the spot. "Careful, human. I hear everything." He had believed it impossible, a trick of his imagination or a projection of stress. But now, as he tried to navigate the twisting corridors, he realized that the terror and exhilaration were real. Every thought he had, every fleeting impulse, was visible to her, and perhaps he feared 2 others as well. He shook his head to clear it, trying to push down the intrusive thoughts and focus on the immediate danger. What's after us? He asked, his voice trembling despite his best efforts. They're more than security drones, Ashara said, her tone clipped and precise. They're sentinels, designed to locate, track, and eliminate threats. And you, human, are the highest value target right now. They know you've seen too much. Adrian's stomach knotted. Seen too much. What had he seen that was so important? He had been careful, so careful to observe, to record, to study. But it seemed that even his curiosity had betrayed him. Ashara's gaze flicked toward him, sharp and calculating. Do not underestimate them. Their intelligence rivals human comprehension. They can anticipate your moves before you make them, detect fear, hesitation, and doubt. They are relentless. He swallowed hard, fear gnawing at his insides. Yet a strange surge of determination rose within him. Somehow, the knowledge that she was at his side, guiding him, watching over him, gave him a strength he hadn't realized he possessed. He could not afford to panic, not now. Not when everything depended on their survival. The corridor twisted sharply to the left, revealing a dimly lit maintenance chamber ahead. Sparks danced from exposed wiring, and the faint smell of burned circuitry hung in the air. Ashara pressed a hand to the wall, signaling him to halt. Her eyes scanned the shadows, moving like liquid, analyzing, anticipating, calculating. Adrian followed her gaze, straining to see through the dim light. They're here, she whispered. Before he could react, a shadow shifted near the far end of the chamber. It was humanoid, sleek, and impossibly fast, yet its movements were too precise, too deliberate. It didn't stumble or hesitate. It advanced with a calculated menace, scanning the chamber for signs of life. Adrian's heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively moved closer to Ashara. You need to remain calm, she murmured, not taking her eyes off the approaching figure. Panic will make you predictable. Predictable means dead. Adrian nodded, though he could barely breathe. The figure stopped, as if sensing their presence, and for a brief moment, the chamber was frozen in tense anticipation. Then, with a fluid motion, it advanced again. Sparks flew as a piece of exposed wiring sparked violently near their feet, and the figure's sensors seemed to react, flickering with red lights that illuminated the darkness in jagged bursts. Ashara's hand tightened slightly on his arm, and he felt a jolt of reassurance. She was unflinching, unshaken, and somehow, that confidence was contagious. He steadied his breathing, forcing his mind to clear, to focus on the rhythm she set, the pace she dictated. Every step, every motion, every decision had to be precise, or they would not survive. They can hear you, she said softly, almost every thought, every fear. They can sense it. Do not give them the satisfaction of predicting you. Adrian's mind screamed. He tried to think of neutral thoughts, of trivial things, but even as he struggled he realized it didn't matter. The sentinel could read intent, detect hesitation, and react to even the faintest ripple of fear. He had to move instinctively, and yet, instinct alone was not enough. He had to trust her, follow her guidance, and let her experience and perception guide them. Ashara moved first, a fluid, seamless motion that propelled them both forward. She ducked behind a console, pulling Adrian down with her, and he barely had time to register the movements before the sentinel was past, scanning the area they had just occupied. Sparks danced around their feet, casting fleeting shadows that made the chamber appear alive, hostile, and sentient. Adrian's chest heaved. How do you do that? He whispered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. Asterisk. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she scanned the room, analyzing every panel, every vent, every shadow. Experience, she said finally. Understanding and focus. Focus is everything in a situation like this. Do not let fear control you. Control your mind, control your thoughts, and you control them. He nodded, trying to internalize her words even as his heart threatened to burst from his chest. The sentinel moved again, slower this time, deliberate, as though it was studying them, calculating the optimal path to neutralize its target. Ashara pressed her back against the wall, signaling him to do the same. She whispered instructions, guiding his movements, instructing him when to step, when to pause, when to move silently. Minutes or was it hours, passed in a tense rhythm, each step calculated, each breath measured. Adrian marveled at her control, at her ability to remain composed amidst the chaos, the danger, the unrelenting presence of death hunting them. He realized, with a strange mixture of fear and fascination, that she wasn't just reading his mind, she was teaching him how to survive it. And just when he thought they might finally be clear of immediate danger, a new sound cut through the chamber, a low, metallic hum, vibrating through the floor and walls. Sparks flew from a panel behind them as the sentinel recalibrated, its sensors shifting to detect movement with renewed precision. Adrian froze, heart hammering, and Ashara's hand gripped his shoulder, anchoring him in place. They've upgraded, she said, her voice tight, controlled. This one is faster, smarter, and more adaptive than any we've encountered. We have seconds, maybe less, to act before it learns our patterns. Adrian's mind raced. Every instinct, every thought, every secret desire he had just moments ago now mattered in ways he could barely comprehend. His training, his intellect, his reasoning, all of it was secondary to survival, and survival depended on listening to her, trusting her, following her lead without question. She moved, and he followed, ducking behind the remnants of a toppled support beam. Sparks ignited around them, shadows dancing like phantoms. The sentinel stopped momentarily, its glowing red eyes scanning, recalculating. Ashara's gaze flicked to Adrian, and for a brief, fleeting second, he saw a flash of something almost human in her expression, something that hinted at empathy, at understanding, and the bond forming between them in the crucible of danger. Then the lights flickered again, plunging the chamber into near darkness. Adrian swallowed hard, gripping her hand, and she whispered, almost in a tease but with deadly seriousness, "One wrong move, human, and they'll know. One thought, one hesitation, and we are lost." He felt a shiver run down his spine, equal parts fear and exhilaration, and as the sentinel began advancing once more, gliding silently over the floor, he realized the truth. Survival didn't belong to the strongest or the smartest. It belonged to those who could master fear, who could control their thoughts, and who could trust the one being who truly understood them. And he had no choice but to follow Ashara deeper into the unknown, toward dangers he could not yet imagine, and, perhaps, toward a revelation that would change everything he thought he knew about himself, about her, and about the universe itself. Adrian's lungs burned as they pressed forward through the winding corridors of the embassy station. Every step measured, every breath shallow. The sentinel's presence lingered behind them like a living shadow, and even with Ashara at his side, he felt a creeping terror in his chest. Every sound seemed amplified, the scrape of metal against metal, the hum of failing lights, the faint vibration of the station's engines thrumming through the floor. He could almost hear the sentinel calculating, adjusting its approach, predicting their movements before they even happened. Ashara moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost preternatural, guiding him with small gestures and subtle signals. Her hand brushed his shoulder, a touch meant to redirect him without words, and he marveled at the quiet authority she wielded. He had never experienced anything like this before. For years he had studied telepathy from a distance, analyzing theory, measuring signals, creating models. But here, in the suffocating shadows of the station, he realized just how intimate and dangerous the ability truly was. "Focus on my voice," she whispered, her words threading through his mind with an ease that left him both comforted and unnerved. "Forget the fear, forget the chaos. Predict the paths, not the outcome. We move step by step, not minute by minute." Adrian nodded, struggling to obey. His thoughts were a storm, a jumble of fear, curiosity, and the forbidden, which his eyes he had tried to suppress. She could hear all of it, and somehow, he knew she wasn't judging him, not in the way humans did, with fear or scorn, but in a way that demanded complete honesty, complete trust. The realization was terrifying, yet oddly liberating. In the corridors of the embassy, with death trailing them, he had no choice but to be utterly himself. They ducked into a narrow maintenance shaft, the metal walls cold and slick under their hands. The sentinel paused outside, its red sensors sweeping methodically, scanning for movement, detecting minute changes in heat and thought. Adrian pressed against the wall, trying to still his racing heart, trying to control the panic that threatened to unravel him. Ashara crouched beside him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glimmered with a calculating intensity. "I can sense hesitation," she said quietly. "Do not think of running. Do not think of surrender. Only think of the next step, and follow me." He swallowed hard and nodded. Her calmness was infectious, a lifeline in the chaos, but the truth remained. One misstep, one flicker of fear, and the sentinel would strike. Adrian could feel its presence, a cold, deliberate force, moving with intelligence and precision that made his skin crawl. It was more than a machine. It was an unyielding predator, and they were the prey. They emerged into a larger chamber, dimly lit, with panels sparking and floors slick with coolant. Ashara scanned the room quickly, mapping their escape. Adrian followed instinctively, trusting her judgment as the sentinel's red glow began to advance into the room. Sparks flew from damaged conduits, casting fleeting, jagged shadows that twisted across the walls like living things. Every step they took was mirrored by the silent stalker, every motion predicted, every pause noted. Ashara whispered, pointing to a narrow catwalk leading to a vent on the far side of the chamber. "We go up. The vents will buy us time." Adrian hesitated. It was a tight crawl, narrow and high above the chamber floor. One misstep would mean a fall into a pit of jagged metal or straight into the sentinel's grasp. But he had no choice. Ashara's hand brushed his again, steadying him, guiding him upward. He felt the strange surge of courage again, the trust, the bond forming between them in the crucible of fear. Without her, he would have been paralyzed, but with her, he found clarity amidst panic, instinct amidst terror. As they climbed, the sentinel paused below, its red sensors sweeping the floor, scanning for any sign of movement. Adrian could almost hear its mechanical calculations, the way it analyzed patterns and adapted to their methods. His thoughts, race plans, contingencies, fears, but Ashara's voice anchored him. "Do not let it re-panic," she said softly. "It will exploit it. Focus only on me." He obeyed, breathing in rhythm with her movements, matching each step to hers, every motion synchronized in a delicate, life-preserving dance. The air in the vent was hot and stale, filled with the metallic scent of the station and the faint hum of machinery. Dust fell in motes around them as they crawled forward, silent, careful, and utterly reliant on one another. A sudden vibration in the vent made Adrian's heart leap. The sentinel had found them, or at least suspected their location. Sparks from the chamber below danced across the floor in erratic arcs, and he could feel the cold, methodical intelligence of the machine, analyzing their escape, adapting, preparing to strike. "Almost there," Ashara whispered, her eyes glinting faintly. In the dim light, "One more turn, and we reach the secondary control hub. It's our only chance to seal the access points and buy ourselves a real window to leave Adrian's mind world." Control hubs, vent systems, sentinels he had trained in theory, read manuals, studied scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for the tangible, suffocating reality of running for his life while his thoughts were exposed to both friend and predator alike. And yet as he glanced at Ashara, he understood the strange paradox of the moment. She could hear everything he thought, yet she guided him without ridicule, without hesitation, and in that guidance, he found a strength he hadn't realized he possessed. They rounded a corner, and the vent opened into the control hub. Lights flickered weakly, and monitors displayed chaotic readings, some flashing in warning, others dark and unresponsive. Sparks erupted from a panel in the corner, sending a shower of fiery droplets across the floor. Adrian slipped slightly, and instinctively Ashara grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Careful," she whispered, and for a moment her voice held more weight than any physical barrier. It wasn't just a warning, it was a tether, a reminder that he was not alone, that survival was not just about skill or chance, but about trust, about connection, about understanding that even in moments of absolute exposure, one could find strength in another. The sentinel's sensors glowed brighter, scanning the vent, its movements deliberate, almost human in their calculation. Sparks flew from damaged wiring, and Adrian realized with a jolt that they had seconds, perhaps less, before it would locate their precise position. Ashara moved first, leaping down into the hub with a fluid grace that defied physics. Adrian followed, heart hammering, landing lightly beside her. The floor vibrated as the sentinel approached, its red sensors cutting through the smoke and sparks like blades. "Now," Ashara hissed, and Adrian knew exactly what she meant. Together, they activated the console, routing power, locking doors, and triggering the emergency shutters to isolate the chamber. Sparks exploded around them as systems overloaded, and the sentinel froze, its sensors flickering erratically, unable to adapt fast enough to the sudden changes. Adrian exhaled sharply, heart pounding, and met her gaze. There was a strange intimacy in the shared victory, a recognition of trust and reliance that neither words nor touch could fully convey. Yet the danger was far from over. Through the vents, through the alarms, through the chaos of the station, he could feel if the sentinel was still out there, adapting, calculating, and relentless. Ashara placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes locking with his. "We've bought time," she said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "But it's not enough. They'll adapt, and soon, we move again. We trust only each other." Adrian nodded, swallowing hard. Every instinct screamed to flee, every thought was exposed, every fear raw and vulnerable, but he understood now the paradox that had become their reality. To survive, he had to embrace exposure, embrace the connection, and trust in the one being who could see his soul without judgment. And as they moved toward the next corridor, stepping carefully into the unknown, Adrian realized that survival wasn't just about evading the sentinel, it was about navigating the fragile, electrifying bond that had formed between them, a bond forged in fear, danger, and the unrelenting truth of being completely known. Shadows shifted ahead, lights flickered, and the faint mechanical hum of the sentinel sensors reminded them both that the threat was still alive, still hunting, still calculating. And in that tense, breathless moment, Adrian knew the truth. The real challenge had only just begun. The corridor ahead twisted sharply, forcing Adrian and Ashara to press close against the cold, metallic walls. The station groaned under strain, and the flickering lights cast jagged shadows that danced like phantoms across the floor. Every nerve in Adrian's body was taut with tension, every thought sharp with anticipation. Behind them, he could feel the sentinel tracking their every movement, its presence heavy and deliberate, calculating their next step, predicting their every instinct. He glanced at Ashara, who moved with fluid precision, guiding him wordlessly, her eyes flicking toward the shadows as if she could see both the predator and the path ahead at once. The air was thick with smoke and the tang of overheated machinery, and sparks showered from damaged panels, sizzling as they landed on the metal floor. Adrian's mind screamed, caught between fear, adrenaline, and the impossible reality of Ashara's ability to read him. Every thought he had, every secret, every fleeting fear, every impulse was exposed, yet somehow, in her presence, it no longer felt like a vulnerability. Instead, it was a strange, electrifying connection, a shared awareness that neither of them could ignore. "We're close," Ashara whispered, her voice calm, commanding, almost hypnotic. "This juncture leads to the central conduit. From there, we can access the station's emergency systems. It's our only chance to slow them down." Adrian nodded, swallowing hard. He tried to match her focus, to suppress the panic that surged through him with each step. The corridor seemed endless, narrowing further, the shadows deepening as the hum of the station's failing systems grew louder. Sparks erupted sporadically from exposed wiring, illuminating the advancing sentinel in brief, jagged bursts. Its red sensors glowed ominously, scanning every surface, every shadow, every movement. It was patient, relentless, intelligent, a predator that understood its prey. As they approached the junction, Ashara paused, crouching low, and pressed a finger to her lips. "It's analyzing us," she whispered. "Do not think about moving too fast. Do not think about fear, only the next step." Adrian's stomach twisted with tension. It was almost impossible to control his thoughts completely. He wanted to run, to flee, to hide, but every instinct screamed that such impulses would betray them both. He forced himself to breathe evenly, to slow the rhythm of his heart, to focus on the present and on Ashara's guidance. Her hand brushed his arm again, steadying him, tethering him to the only reality that mattered. Their survival. The sentinel advanced, gliding with mechanical precision. Sparks from a damaged panel reflected in its sensors, creating a strobe-like effect that made its movements even more unnerving. Adrian felt a cold prickle of terror run down his spine. The moment it noticed even the smallest deviation from their path, it would strike. But Ashara was unflinching, scanning for weak points, analyzing its pattern, anticipating its next move. Her calm was a beacon amidst the chaos, a guide he clung to desperately. "On my mark," she murmured. "We move together." No hesitation. Adrian's mind raced. He could almost feel the sentinel's calculations, the cold, methodical assessment of their every motion. He realized with a shock that survival depended not on hiding, not on running blindly, but on understanding it, predicting it, and acting in perfect synchrony with Ashara. Every flicker of fear, every doubt, every half-formed thought could be exploited. He swallowed hard and nodded. "Now," she hissed. And they moved. They sprinted through the narrowing corridor, leaping over sparks and debris, sliding past jagged pieces of metal. The sentinel lunged after them, moving impossibly fast, sensors glowing like twin red suns. Sparks flew as it struck the walls, its limbs moving with deadly accuracy. Yet Ashara's guidance was flawless. She led him through a tangle of maintenance conduits, down twisting shafts, and over slick metal grates. Adrian's muscles burned, his lungs screamed for air, but he forced himself to keep pace. He couldn't let fear take him, not when she was counting on him as much as he was counting on her. Finally, they reached the central conduit, a massive chamber filled with humming machinery and glowing control panels. Ashara moved immediately to a terminal, her fingers flying over the interface. "We can reroute power, lock down sections of the station, and create a buffer zone," she said, her voice urgent. "It will give us time, but only if you follow my lead." Adrian nodded, trying to focus. Sparks danced across the floor, and the sentinel's sensors pierced the dim light, searching, calculating. It was adaptive, relentless, a perfect predator. But here, in this chamber, with Ashara guiding him, Adrian felt a surge of determination he hadn't known he possessed. He positioned himself near a secondary panel, ready to assist, trusting her expertise, her instincts, her uncanny ability to anticipate danger. The sentinel lunged, smashing through part of the railing, and Adrian barely managed to leap aside as a shard of metal clanged across the floor. Ashara's eyes never wavered from the console. "Keep moving," she instructed. "Feed me the readings. Watch the circuits. Every second counts." He obeyed, his mind hyper-focused, every movement synchronized with hers. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and the sentinel recalculated its approach, but Ashara's strategy was flawless. She anticipated its reactions, rerouted power to create barriers, and guided Adrian in real time. The terror of exposure, the raw vulnerability of knowing she could read every thought transformed into a strange, powerful intimacy. He realized that being fully known, fully seen, had given him a clarity and courage he could never have found alone. The sentinel paused for a fraction of a second, senses scanning, and Ashara seized a moment. Now Adrian, he slammed the secondary panel, diverting energy, and a surge of electricity shot through the chamber. The sentinel froze, its senses flickering violently, sparks erupting from its mechanical joints. It recoiled, and for the first time, Adrian felt the taste of victory. He looked at Ashara, awe and gratitude mingling with adrenaline, but the moment of triumph was brief. A low rumble shook the chamber as another section of the station buckled, threatening to collapse. Sparks rained down around them, and the sentinel, though momentarily stalled, began advancing again. Its senses glowed brighter, its mechanical limbs adjusting, recalculating, and Adrian knew the fight was far from over. Ashara grabbed his arm, pulling him toward an emergency exit. "We're not done," she whispered. "We've bought time, but we must move. They're relentless, and this is far from over." Adrian's chest heaved, exhaustion mingling with exhilaration. The terror, the exposure, the intensity of the chase, all of it had forged a bond between them, a connection that transcended words. In the chaos, amidst sparks, shadows, and the relentless sentinel, he realized he trusted her with his life, completely. More than that, he realized that the connection they shared, born of fear, survival, and unspoken truths, was something far more profound than he could have imagined. They sprinted toward the emergency exit, the sentinel adjusting its trajectory to intercept them, and Adrian felt a surge of determination unlike anything he had known. He would not fail, not when she had risked everything to save him, not when their lives were intertwined in a dangerous dance of survival and trust. The exit loomed ahead, a narrow doorway leading to a maintenance shaft that promised temporary safety. Sparks rained around them as the sentinel lunged one final time, senses blazing, claws striking the floor. Adrian felt the wind of its approach, the threat palpable in every nerve. But Ashara moved with deadly precision, timing their leap perfectly. They landed hard on the shaft floor, rolling to absorb the impact, and she pressed herself against the wall. Guiding him silently, Adrian's heart raced, mind spinning. Yet amidst the terror, a sense of clarity settled over him. He understood now that survival, trust, and connection were inseparable. She had read his thoughts, guided him, protected him, and in doing so, had given him a chance to see the strength he never knew he had. The shaft stretched ahead, dark and narrow, yet it offered a promise, a chance to regroup, to fight again, and to face whatever awaited them next together. Adrian gripped her hand tightly, and she returned the gesture with a subtle nod, a silent vow of unity. And in the shadows, amidst the hum of the station and the distant threat of the sentinel, Adrian realized the truth. The danger was far from over, the challenges ahead unimaginable, but with her by his side, completely knowing him, he felt ready to face anything. The maintenance shaft narrowed, forcing Adrian and Ashara to move in near silence. Sparks from the station's failing conduits lit their path intermittently, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The sentinel had not given up. Its sensors flickered in the distance, red eyes scanning relentlessly, searching for any trace of movement. Adrian's heart raced, muscles trembling from exhaustion, but every step forward was guided by Ashara's calm presence, every decision synchronized with hers. He realized he had never felt so dependent on another person, and yet, the bond between them was unshakable. Born of shared terror and mutual trust, they reached a junction where the vents split, one path leading to a service ladder ascending to the upper levels, the other curving toward the main power hub. Ashara pressed her palm against the wall, listening. Adrian could feel her focus, intense and unbroken,